Get the fuck up. Simon says, get the fuck up. Throw your hands in the sky.
The first several years that I was a powerlifter, most of the advice I got was by reading. So there's a lot of stuff on the internet, a lot of articles on Elite that I used to look at, probably all of them. I would go to seminars to learn from people, not just, I went to like a Louis Simmons seminar, but a lot of different types of seminars that were more involved with my work, like personal training stuff. So a lot of it was based around like corrective exercise and stuff like that. But while that was pretty helpful for me, I think a lot of the powerlifting stuff that I learned was basically reading and trying stuff on my own. And then when I would go to meets, I would meet other lifters and I would just kind of talk to them. But there wasn't anybody who I would look at and, have as a mentor at that point. So it was pretty much just, doing everything on my own for most of the early years and really for most of my career in general.
When you're saying trying on your own, when you're starting out, how old were you when you started?
When I was 24, I switched from just trying to get big and jacked at the gym to actually like I'm going to train for competition. And that was I had about 6 months that I targeted for a first meet.
Were you training before that? Just strength training in general?
Yeah, just going to the gym and, it was kind of like, I would say it's bodybuilding, but I was also trying to get as strong as possible. And most of the lifts were the barbell lifts, but for, I cared more about like rep ranges than I did about 1 rep max before I started competing.
So how old do you think you were when you started lifting weights?
When I was, I think when I was 13, my parents got me like a bar. Okay. So I just do curls and shrugs and rows in my room and stuff like that. And then at 15, I started reading stuff like Muscle and Fitness and going to the gym. And 16, I could go to the YMCA because I could drive there. And so I pretty much have always trained with weights from when I was an early teen.
Okay, so for the people listening here, I think they need to understand that you had 9 years of developing a base and kind of figuring shit out on your own, just doing bodybuilding work and stuff like that, before you really started to experiment with different powerlifting methods. So with that in mind, with new lifters coming in, should they try to emulate that, or do you think that they should try to just go straight into the powerlifting mode?
I think either way is fine, and I think the biggest thing that is really hard to appreciate, but when you see the difference, it's like night and day, is when you're a beginner, you should learn how to lift with good form. You can always do more reps for kind of the size and mass approach, and you can always do phases that are centered around strength and peaking, but the limitation of bad technique is like, for all the work you put in, you have a much lower ceiling for how far you can progress, and you're going to train much less efficiently. Much more stress on the body in a bad way, and much less, just building of muscle and efficiency in the lifts. So that's what I felt like when I went to Russia for the first time, and I saw the way that the guys just looked like they had learned how to squat like right after they learned how to crawl and walk.
Yes.
And correctly from a coach, not just like from watching the big dude at the gym. I didn't even think about squatting when I started lifting. It was just like I'm gonna bench and do curls. And then when I was 15, I was saying I was like reading Muscle and Fitness, and it was like this magazine issue with Sean Ray doing a back workout, and I was like, you can do it. You can train back. You know that. So you go to the gym and just figure shit out on yourself, and it's like, you can go either route, but I think that's the thing that you don't appreciate until you see it, is when you learn proper, like really good technique from the start as like a priority. You just, maybe it slows you down in the beginning, but it makes your progress unlimited from there.
I'm not really sure. Well, I guess it depends where you are at the beginning, but I've always kind of preached that, people will kill themselves and do all kinds of crazy shit to try to put 20 pounds on their lift in a year, but their squat sucks. Yeah. Where if they just learned how to squat with better efficiency and better technique, they could put 100 pounds on their squat in 8 weeks or 4 weeks. So that technical efficiency, I think, is, and just technique in general, there's efficiency. When I speak about that, I'm talking about being able to keep the technique with higher weight. Your weight is always the breaking factor, but that's an important thing. Would you say, because a lot of people talk about technique with the main lifts, would you say that you feel just important about that for the supplemental and the accessories as well?
Yeah, the way I look at it for me is I have certain supplemental lifts, like variations of the main lifts that I think are great. And I don't have like 20 of each one. I have 3 or 4 or 5 that are that are the bread and butter ones. And so those ones, to me, it's like the form is just as critical, that I master those lifts and I don't just kind of like bounce from one to the other. You know, so it's one thing, you know, to get your squat and your bench and your deadlift, or even sumo and conventional deadlift, but to master high bar squats and front squatting and squatting with a safety bar, like those are the big ones for me. For the deadlifts, you know, I do block pulls and I do deficits, and just by like those little leverage changes, those should still be done with the same, you know, the same efficiency.
Yeah.
And so to me, it's just as important that your technique and your precision is key, as well as this, you know, is just as good on those ones too.
Yes.
And honestly, like I look at the bodybuilding accessory lifts, like I see a lot of people go through them and they're just counting reps. And to me, it's like, well, if I'm going to do rows, they've got to actually, while I'm training the rows, I've got to have a technique and a mindset that I'm doing the row and I'm thinking, okay, I'm doing it in a certain way because it's benefiting my bench, or I'm doing it a certain way and it's benefiting my deadlift. And so there's really a technique that fits in context, not just going to go and hammer them out.
Yeah. Whereas to illustrate an example to the people that are listening, you can do a bent over row for hypertrophy, just as a bodybuilder, which is going to be completely different if you're doing the bent over row to try to build your bench, which may be slightly different if you're going to try to do it for your deadlift.
Yes, when I focus on bench, I do rows where the focus is on the squeeze at the finish of the row, and the posture should be similar to bench, so I'm getting like an extended posture. But if I do rows where I'm focusing on deadlift, I like that stretch with the rounding in the upper back, because that's where my upper back strength needs to be for a deadlift. You know, so to be able to have weight on my back while my back is stretched forward, it's a big deal for deadlifts, but not for bench. It's good for size, which in turn might be good for the bench, but really it's how tight can you contract that, you know, the squeeze position that's going to come into play at the bottom of a bench. So it's like you can do the rows for different purposes.
Yes.
So different variations of rows work best for each lift, I think.
The other main takeaway, or I guess to finish this segment, is the better your technique, the lower risk of injury.
Yeah.
You know, and we're in a brutal sport to begin with, that over a period of time wear and tear is going to kind of beat everybody down at a certain point in time. But you're going to get beat down a lot faster if your technique sucks. So with any exercise, the better technique, the safer you're going to be.